This reading is from Censored number 109, and it's entitled, When Does the Greed Stop? By William J. Eisenman, Ph.D. Business, religion, and government in the United States have merged into a sticky, quicksand-like false patriotic substitute for what once was. Ronald Reagan's election as president brought to Washington, D.C., in full force the Chicago School of Economics ideology, the two rules of which are trimming back the power of centralized government and financial deregulation. Since that time, the United States has been sacrificing to the gods of the free market. The United States is in hock to some of the world's most unsavory regimes. America's financial sector has grown very powerful since the 1970s. Our financial services don't compete in a free market. They are casinos. We coddle our financial industry. We are now caught up in market dogmatism, and any criticism of this perverted structure is considered unpatriotic and un-American. All international trade agreements are prejudiced toward capital, focusing on the rights of investors. America's trade policy is a market with no rules. All power accrues to the corporate elite. America's trade deficit in 1994 was $182 billion. In 2002, after NAFTA, it was $482 billion. In the first 30 months of the illegitimate presidency of G.W. Bush, America lost 2.5 million jobs. And until the end of the Bush regime, not one net job was produced. The jobs that were lost will never come back unless our trade and tax policies are changed. In the real world, our only government can stand up as a counterweight to corporate power. But corporations have been working feverishly to buy, emasculate, and make impotent we, the people, and our government. Almost every trade agreement wrests power from government and grants it to private interests. They win and we lose. History shows us that capitalism, left to its own devices, cannot work properly. It writes off the poor. It ruins the environment. It won't build roads, schools, hospitals, libraries, or man firehouses. What we know today as free trade is the method huge corporations have used to undermine democratic governments. Free trade expands their power and helps them co-opt authoritative regimes. As shown in previous censored articles, the global economic growth has not helped the poor in any country it has been tried. The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund are not doing it right. Between 1943 and 1973, the American median wage increased by 80%. But in the last 27 years, it has been stagnant. Globalization, to be a reality, must work for people, not just profits. Simply put, America's foreign policy supports dictators. China has a Stalinist-type capitalism. Singapore, Indonesia, and China prove that a country can have free markets without having a free people. There's no connection between free market capitalism and democracy, between mom apple pie and Chevrolet. For every $1 billion in trade deficit, 13,000 American jobs are lost. Our trade deficit with China in 1985 was $100 million. And in 2003, it was $100 billion. Sometimes it appears as though the United States is deliberately impoverishing its own people while prospering other countries. This is not commerce. This is deliberate cachexia. NAFTA had two goals. One was cheap labor. Two was cutting costs for U.S. corporations. NAFTA was not about American jobs or exports. Teddy Roosevelt said free trade produces a fatty degeneration of the moral fiber. Adam Smith warned concerning elites that their interest is never exactly the same with that of the public. He added that the elites have generally an interest to deceive and even to oppress the public. Adam Smith was also aware that investment in one's own country produces more revenue and employment than investment in foreign trade. Franklin D. Roosevelt warned that the liberty of democracy is not safe if the people tolerate the growth of private power to a point where it becomes stronger than their democratic state. Make no mistake, and it is no secret, that many conservative Republicans are out to destroy the United States government. Some of them meet weekly to find ways and methods to shrink the United States government until it is small enough to be drowned in a bathtub. These disaster capitalists have no interest in reform or repairing that which is. Their wish is to destroy the only counterweight to corporate power, the government. These Friedmanite free market worshippers are corporatists. They love the corporation. The bigger, the better. Their idea of government is the model of the corporation. G.W. Bush was to have been the first CEO president. History proves that free markets overthrow democracy. Note Iran in 1953, Guatemala in 1954. And by 1976, Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, and Chile. Today, the list is even longer. Free trade and privatization have no direct link with creating stability in an economy. It has become clear that lawlessness has become an integral part of what we call free markets and globalization. We know now that the IMF subverts democracy. Free market globalization has fostered inequality, corruption, and environmental destruction in its wake. The free market worships profits, endless profits. In this structure, the public sector has no part. Worldwide, the free market ideology has excluded millions of people from participating in an economy. In the mid-1990s, the Congress set up the Boskin Commission. The goal of the commission was to understate the inflation rate and thereby save the government money that it wouldn't have to pay in cost of living increases, according to the CPI. When G.W. Bush took office, the Consumer Price Index became political, leading to the cutting of entitlement benefits. The methodologies were suspect, and the inflation data was warped. From 1979 to 2004, the price of a new car increased from $6,847 to $27,940, which is a 308% increase. However, during the same period, the CPI increased only 71%. This means that 237% of the price increase disappeared as a result of fantasy accounting procedures, quality adjustments, quality improvements, and hedonics. Hedonics being distortions, misrepresentations, cheating, and lies. Growth was overstated, and inflation was understated. If you were receiving a Social Security check or any other income dependent on cost of living increases, you were robbed. Now, the government is threatening not to pay COLAs for at least 2 years because of fraudulent inflation figures. Expenses are still rising, and savings and investments have been decimated. About 50 million Americans receive Social Security payments, and they have been robbed. New figures and methods now put the poverty rate of the elderly at 20%. The old methods didn't take into account rises in medical costs and other salient figures and factors. While the deserving will receive no COLAs, Congress and all government employees will receive their 4%. So not only has Congress been robbing many of us all these years, now they stick it to us with their COLAs. And remember, both political parties were in on this diabolical charade. Between 1993 and 2006, the income growth of the bottom 99% averaged only 1.1%, while the top 1% during that same time period experienced 5 times 1.1%. The bottom 99% of Americans never even kept up with inflation. Between 2002 and 2006, the bottom 99% still were locked into their 1.1% income growth rate, while the top 1% had an annual growth rate of 11%. The robbery continues, and none of this happens by chance. By this time, it should be clear to all critical thinkers that this country's financial meltdown was a result of deregulation fever. All safeguards put in place by Franklin D. Roosevelt to prevent depression were shot down. Necessary regulations were laughed at. In 1999, the Financial Services Modernization Act allowed the merging of banking, insurance, and stock activities and did away with accountability. President Obama's economic advisor, Larry Summers, got President Clinton to sign the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, which exempted derivatives from regulation, thus allowing Wall Street to make up its own rules. These derivatives are the toxic assets that brought our economy to its knees. The bastards that bundled up all these fantasy derivatives thrust the risk on us taxpayers, not on Wall Street. In the past 10 years, Wall Street spent $5 billion in campaign contributions and lobbying to get what they wanted. Under G.W. Bush's non-governance, financial predators of all stripes were allowed to run wild. Regulations were non-existent. And all this done by those who would dare call themselves Christians, the foxes ran the henhouse. When extremely smart people are consistently wrong, it is usually because there is an awful lot of reasons for them to turn stupid. Most of the time, the cause of this stupidity is money. We see this all too clearly in regard to the safeguards put in place after the Great Depression being removed and being replaced by mythical free market ideology. Alan Greenspan was wrong. Robert Rubin was wrong. Larry Summers was wrong. And the list goes on. Many misconceptions abide about stocks and the stock market. A great many people believe that when they buy a stock, the money they pay for that stock goes to the company that issued the stock. Only with the initial public offering and later stock issuances does that money go to the company. Stocks are purchased from other investors who get your money. When lots of people buy stocks from one another, prices go up because buyers outnumber sellers. This results in inflation. Also, no real money is created. These stock prices are fictions. As soon as sellers outnumber buyers, the prices will tumble. The money vanishes. Wall Street is a casino and not an integral part of a natural, healthy economy. And when Wall Street gambles with the necessities of life, real people get hurt and sometimes die. The Troubled Assets Relief Program, TARP, was simply a cover for theft from we the people. Congress was taken for a ride. Trillions of dollars are being taken from both the Treasury and the Federal Reserve. Our money! Banks have been allowed to create money out of nothing. These banks have no reserves. Our government is being used to accelerate the wealth upward. Article 1, Section 9 of the United States Constitution gives the United States government, our government, you and me, the right to create money. With the adoption of the Federal Reserve Act in 1913, this power to create money was privatized. As you can see, the drive for privatization and the destruction or neutering of our government has been going on for a long time. America's economic system is debt-based. The government borrows money from banks and pays interest on that debt. If we did away with the Fed, we would not need to create money by borrowing and paying interest. We would get the money for free. This money could then be used for social and economic purposes for the nation. The way we do it now is a blatant challenge to United States sovereignty. As it is, debt keeps getting larger and larger, while public money keeps going to the privileged few. Representative Dennis Kucinich sees the day coming when our overwhelming debt pushes the United States into an IMF-style structural adjustment that will knock down our health benefits, knock down our Social Security, and knock down education funds. Money is a creature of the law, and we must have power over it. We must also understand that when there is a slowdown in the aggregate economy, giving money to banks and insurance companies won't prime the pump. This is Economics 101. An authentic economy would be based upon renewable resources. In this type of economy, the economic virtues would be honesty, thrift, care, good work, generosity, imagination, from which we have compassion. In a natural economy, nature would be put before consumption. Also, certain things would be considered priceless, such as fertile land, clean water, and air, and ecological health. Many worshippers of big business and some conservative religious Republicans claim that God gave them the land to do with what they will. However, Psalm 24 states clearly that the earth belongs to God and everything in it and on it. In Leviticus 25:23, God says the land shall not be sold forever. The land is sacred and it should be used wisely. Our economy lacks virtues. Consumption comes before nature, which serves only a small class of wealthy elites. These people believe the economy exists solely so that they can further enrich themselves. Big corporations control our government with money, lobbying, and purchased political power. There's no concept of service to the people. Our economy is perverted. It does not meet needs and cannot tell the difference between wants and needs. Our economy has also outsourced the manufacture of necessities, and this will be detrimental to our country's survival in times of an emergency. Our economy has little respect for the farmer. And then there is usury. Usury is ubiquitous throughout our economy. This economy that has the undying support of those calling themselves patriotic conservative Christians. These Christians claim they derive their God from the Bible, yet the Bible abhors usury. Usury exploits the poor. It is an injustice and an offense against charity. In Luke 6:34-35, Christians are admonished to take care of the poor, not exploit them. Christians are to lend without hoping for anything in return. As does inflation, usury destabilizes the relationship of money to goods. Speculative trading in mortgages, futures, and commercial paper accomplishes the same thing. All this gives a monetary value to commodities that have no present existence or no existence at all. This subverts real values to false ones. Our economy takes no heed of the fact that the fate of our land cannot be separated from the fate of our people and our country. We have depressed farm income while allowing production costs to rise, which favors big agribusiness. Why would we want an economic recovery that continues the perverted economy that we have? The economy we have is a myth. For nearly 30 years now, the wealthy have not paid their fair share of taxes. This upward movement of cash has impoverished our country, the middle class, and the poor. Deficits do matter. And if in a recession we wish to stimulate the aggregate economy, then that means the stimulus must provide good jobs and disposable income for those who have none. And isn't it peculiar that those calling themselves conservative Christians are on the wrong side of the healthcare problem and the economic one? In the millennium, when Jesus rules the earth from Jerusalem, the economy will be radically different than what we have today. There will be no go it alone, up by the bootstrap, free market economy. There will be no usury. Standards will never change. No one will get rich off the backs of others. Every person will have his own land and his own way of making a living. There will be no competition, as competition was introduced by Satan, who wanted to knock God off his own throne. There will be no poor, no sick, no disabled. These examples from the Bible indicate that there is another way than the way we know. Only self-loathers would defend our present economy, and only greedy sinners would call for no reform.